Thank you.
Okay. All right.
This time the state would like to call Kyle Violette to the stand.
Sir, I trust you know where the witness stand is. If you could approach it, face the judge, and remain standing for your own proof.
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell us about what your job is, though I do think I gave it away?
My name is Kyle Daney. I'm employed full-time by the Rochester Police Department. I'm currently a full-time detective there. I've been with the department since 2013, and I've been a detective for about 3 years within the division.
Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your come up to detective, your training and experience, where you started off, a little bit of that background?
Sure. Academy first, field training, eventually solo patrol for a while. Eventually I worked into a community engagement division, and into a problem-oriented policing division that kind of focused more on problem chronic issues and narcotics, and then worked my way into detectives. During that time also, around probably 2017, 2018, I began working as almost a specialty position or an extra added position of added responsibilities of working on what we called our evidence team. It was more specialized in if we had a scene that was a little bit larger, officers that were a little bit higher trained in the collection, the preservation of a crime scene, documentation of a crime scene, and then the preservation and collection of evidence.
So I'm glad you brought that.
I'm sorry. I didn't take your last name.
Yep, yeah, it's Daney, D-A-N-I-E.
And, Chair, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm glad you brought up the evidence training. Can you tell us a little bit about the specialized training specifically that you've undergone in terms of collecting evidence, assessing a scene, that whole genre of police investigation?
Sure. Just looking kind of at our training coordinator, I said, hey, can I get my past training on all of evidence? And I'd like to say that it's about a month long of, you know, the 40 hours one week, 40 hours another week. I took a basic 3-week-long training on the collection of evidence, I think from what was called Forensics Training Services, LLC. It's a company that really went from like nuts to bolts of responding to the scene, the preservation of the actual scene itself, and working into photography, different types of things that you might wear to preserve the scene, as well as then working into photographing the scene, collecting those pieces of evidence, and then potentially even examining those pieces of evidence further, whether it's a chemical process, dusting for latent prints with fingerprint powder, as well as other things like that. With that training, I've taken additional crime scene photography trainings, fingerprint trainings. The academy now in New Hampshire is certifying their officers, all the recruits, through a basic crime scene training that's 1 week long. I've also gone back to take that, advanced photography, vehicle processing, and so on that way. We aren't a forensic lab per se. I can process certain pieces of evidence, but at some point we stop and send that to the New Hampshire State Lab for further examination, depending on the piece of evidence and the case.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and then we'll backtrack a little bit just because of talking about your evidence experience. Was part of your role in this investigation processing the scene?
It was.
I'd just like you to tell us a little bit about specifically the role a detective serves at the Rochester Police Department versus, we've heard from sergeants, we've heard from patrol officers, so specifically your duties and responsibilities aside from that evidence collection training that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Rochester, we currently have 7 detectives, there's a couple other open positions, and a detective lieutenant. We do get some cases firsthand, and when I say that, meaning typically your patrol officer is the first to respond to a 911 call. Detectives, though, sometimes might come to a major call out where there's an active scene going on. And so we might respond to those things like drug overdose deaths, homicides, physical assaults, sex assaults, things like that that we would respond out to pretty much on scene if that happened. Otherwise, we're getting a lot of things that were past tense. I'm applying for search warrants. My day-to-day is really interviewing people, developing probable cause, writing search warrants, obtaining the records from different companies, video, things like that, and so on, and building a case over time. Typically something that happened after the fact that I'm following up, sometimes from an initial officer's report or initial sergeant's report.
Thank you, Detective. I appreciate you going through all of that with us. I know it's new to some people.
Not a problem.
Jury. So were you working on the day of April 4th, 2024?
I wasn't at the time.
You weren't. Did you end up working on that day?
I did, no.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
I got called in we have 2 detectives that are typically on call just in case no one is in. I got a call saying, hey, we have a major scene, we have a shooting. Those 2 detectives are tied up with the suspected shooter. We need someone to come in and assist with the processing of a crime scene. And so that's why I was called.
So were you at the police station when you got this call in?
I was at home.
You were at home. Did you go to Summer Street first?
No.
Where did you go first?
I went to the police department, which is pretty typical of any type of call out. I go to dispatch, I like to see what do we have, what do we need for resources, where is this crime scene, what are the things I should be bringing, because I made that mistake before of it being very cold or very hot, and just getting any other information before going.
So once you arrived at the police station, did you become aware of anything? Did you speak with anyone there who made you aware of anything?
Yes, so Officer Birmingham had been back at the station, and from speaking with him briefly, he had been one of the responding officers. He had obtained, it looked to me like a video, like he used a department cruiser phone and videotaped a phone that was playing a video surveillance of the incident that I was supposed to be going out and documenting.
Were you aware at that time of where that footage came from?
I was told that it was from the cameras of 43 Summer Street, which was the alleged victim here, Kyle Violette's house.
So I believe we've already seen that video. Did you personally view that video?
The one that Officer Birmingham showed me, I did.
After you viewed that video, is that at that point, did you go out to Summer Street?
After grabbing the evidence kit and everything else I needed, yes.
When you arrived at Summer Street, can you tell us a little bit about what you see as you drive up?
Yep. So it was 10, I want to say 10:40, maybe 11. It could be even later than that. So it was dark. It was very cold. It was kind of spitting snow. It had snowed a little bit that day too. There was a couple of different police cruisers that were in the roadway of Summer Street facing out of town. Like if you're familiar with I know you guys did a kind of a walk-through area, but away from the police department towards heading towards Eastern Ave. They're facing that way as if they were responding to the call in the roadway, and then there was some yellow caution tape kind of wrapped around some of those cruisers over to a telephone pole to kind of preserve what was believed to be the entire scene.
So after you arrived, you kind of take this scene in. What is your first step in investigation, evidence processing, scene management? What's kind of the first thing you do as you get out of your cruiser?
Yep. So once I meet with whoever was there, so it was Lieutenant Hurley was kind of on scene to point outside the caution tape what they might have seen. I start taking initial photographs. The reason being is I don't want it, anytime I go into a scene, I could introduce either contamination, I could kick something over or anything. So I try to take as much overall photos that show the big picture before we start to go into that scene and look more.
Would you recognize some of those photos if we showed them to you today?
I would.
Your Honor, may I approach? Thank you.
Rather, these are full.
These are exhibits 16, 17, and 18. Has Dane shown you what has been already in exhibit 16, 17, and 18? Would you mind taking a look at those pictures and telling us what you see?
Yep, so 16, 17, and 18 appear to be the roadway that would have been in front of 41 Summer Street. And some of these are pictures that I believe an officer must have either taken or body cam before.
Is this visual to visuals depicted in these pictures? Are they familiar to you having arrived on the scene before?
The physical layout and the blood on the ground, yes. When I arrived, EMTs had already left the scene as well.
Is this accurate for how the scene appeared minus the EMTs in the corner?
Yes.
Is the blood on the street accurate how it appeared to you?
Yes.
Is the snow on the street accurate how it appeared to you?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to adjourn. Thank you. Again, I believe you've already been told that you will have copies of these in your deliberation room. Detective Daney, aside from taking pictures when you arrived on the scene and general observation, did you do anything else regarding evidence collection when you arrived?
Yep. So after taking initial photographs, we started to search the scene for pieces of evidence. I had previously been pointed out by the lieutenant, hey, there's shell casings that they had located with a flashlight. And so from there, we put placards, which is the yellow marker. You might see a number on it. I started with 5 because that's what I had. So we have to go, I believe it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I put a placard by that piece of evidence so that I know not to step on it, as well as to take a photo widescreen so that you can see all those placards and be like, okay, what was placard number 7? And you look and see what that was. And then I'd also take a mid-range and then a close-up of placard, say number 7, with whatever piece that evidence was.
Once you photograph the location of these shell casings, actually I'm going to back up a little bit. Can you just clarify for everyone so we're all on the same page what a shell casing is?
Yep. So with a firearm, you have a shell casing that is enclosed. I'm not by any means a firearms expert or anything, but you have a shell casing, usually brass, metal, that is enclosed with some gunpowder as well as other materials, and then a projectile, usually a lead bullet. And so when a firearm, shoots, it extracts that shell casing after that explosion goes off and a projectile goes out the barrel of the firearm, and the shell casing will get ejected, depending on the type of handgun it is. If it's a revolver, obviously it stays inside, but a automatic, like a handgun, it would extract shooting off.
So we're going to focus on these shell casings for a little bit. Once you photographed where they were, you marked them with the placards, what are kind of your next steps specifically regarding evidence collection for these shell casings? How do you preserve those?
So you said after photographing? So 6 shell casings were located on the ground. After they were photographed close range so you can see, they would be individually taken wearing gloves, put them into a paper envelope, packaged separately.
Your Honor, may I approach? Thank you. Counsel, this is statements 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, sorry, 18. Detective Daney, is this the type of envelope that would be put in?
Yes.
Time? If I were to show you these envelopes and hand them to you, to be able to determine whether or not these shell casings, these shell casings.
Yes.
Without.
Right. So I'm just looking for the evidence label, Rochester Police Department. Like this one says 9mm Luger shell casing, placard number 10. So I remember that's placard number 10. This is evidence tape. I have my signature and the date that it was signed, making sure that it wasn't reopened or anything like that.
So even without opening those envelopes, are you able to confidently attest that those are shell casings you retrieved?
These are the shell casings I collected.
Your Honor, I do move for these shell casings to be admitted as full exhibits. These are states 13, 14, 12, 9, 10, 11. That are currently marked for ID.
That's without objection.
No objection. So exhibits 9 through 14 are full exhibits.
Detective Danny, I'm just going to open these for simplicity's sake. Doesn't matter.
Pull it out. Would you like me to take the shell casing off? Each one?
One is fine. Your Honor, permission to publish it there.
Your Honor, this would be placard number 10, which is, oh, sorry, ID number exhibit 14. So each one of these probably should be in one of these smaller ones, just because that's what I had on scene that was loaded into here. It's also got the number 10 on it for placard.
The labeling both on the 700 dual officers used to print the correct placard.
Yeah, exactly. So if we have a ton of placards out there, we want to make sure the picture I take and the shell casing I seize and the envelope I put in, I need label number 10 so that when I have, say, 30 shell casings, I can really say this is that one, and that one was located here. Would you like that? Yep.
This is one. To your recollection, were they all of this nature?
Yes, they were.
What does that indicate to you as an officer?
That the, I'm sorry.
That they were all essentially identical shell casings. That indicated
That it came from the same type of gun. You know, often too, we don't see a whole lot of people loading different types of ammunition into a gun. It's all the same type of ammunition, so I could lead me to believe that it probably came from a same type of gun, but the fact that it's all 9mm definitely came from a 9mm handgun.
Were shell casings the only piece of evidence that you collected from the scene that night?
It was not.
Can you tell us what else you collected from the scene?
Yep, so in the area where there's the trail of blood, in front of the driveway, right around there, 41, Mr. Levesque's residence, there was a black holster for a handgun.
I'm going to pause you there. Would you recognize that holster if you saw it today?
I would.
Safety. Detective Daney, can you just reiterate for the jury where you found this holster specifically?
It was right in the front area of the driveway or the roadway of 41 Summer Street.
Did you conduct the same method with the holster that you did for the shells in terms of preserving where it was located on the scene?
I did.
Did that include the placard placement?
Yes.
Did that include photographing it?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, may I approach? At the moment, it's right. Detective Daney, does this bag also contain the same label, which the shell casings did, in terms of where it was collected, placard, and
Yep, so this white, I know you can't read it, but this white thing is what we call an evidence tag for the Rochester Police Department. It gives us a property number, and then I labeled it as the Black Hawk, which is a company holster, placard number 11.
And it was ripped open a little bit of the dimension and
Without objection.
No objection. This is now exhibit 8 full exhibit.
Permission to publish. Other than the holster and the shell casings, Detective, did you collect any other evidence that night?
There was some paperwork and looked like receipts and cigarette pack that was located near the area of the holster that was collected.
So you found the holster. Did you find a gun?
Yes. So at the scene, with the blood going up towards the front steps near 41 Summer Street, in the parking lot of the driveway of 41 Summer Street was a truck that had its, it was like a plow truck, and it had its driver's side door open, and an officer was standing by, kind of making sure no one would go in that. That was told to me that it was identified as Mr. Levesque's truck, and so at that point I had to speak to another detective that was speaking to Mr. Levesque to be able to go into that truck.
Did you ultimately receive permission to go into that truck?
Yeah, so I spoke to Detective Garston, who had Mr. Levesque sign a permission to search the truck and its contents there, which granted me the right to go in and look for any additional evidence.
Upon that permission, were you able to locate a firearm inside that truck?
Yeah, so even looking on the outside with the door open, you could see a 9mm handgun with its slide locked back to the rear and an empty magazine that was separate, and they were both sitting on the driver's seat.
So I just want to clarify, if there's the gun and the magazine, are they together at this point?
On
When you
scene,
saw it on
they're next to each other. The magazine is not inserted into the magazine well.
the, thank you for clarifying, I think I made this for, Your Honor, I would like to show the witness with the marked state exhibit 5 for ID.
Can we approach on this though for 1 second?
Detective Meany, I'm showing you, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 5 for ID. This has been rendered safe by all involved personnel
It has.
in this particular matter. I'm not going to hand the box over to you, I'm just going to show you, do you recognize the firearm in this box?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize the firearm in this box?
Both from photographing it, if we could look back at photos and see the serial number, as well as the fact that the box has the property, can I see the property tag as well? Has the property tag, the evidence tape, and signature as well.
And I only mentioned about the gun. The gun is not the only item in here, is that accurate?
That is correct.
What else is in here?
There is a magazine for the gun.
Are you able to tell visually by looking at it if the magazine is empty?
Yes, I am.
Is this the condition in which you found both the gun and the magazine?
It is.
Understanding that it was not the type of box.
Right, it was just, in the condition it was, sitting on the driver's seat.
Thank you, Detective. Your permission to publish it.
Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, so this has been by agreement with the full exhibit, so it's going to be a full exhibit. Just so you understand the protocol down the road, this weapon will not be sent back to you like all the other exhibits to the jury room. This is the one type of exhibit we don't do that with. Because it is a full exhibit, if at any point you wanted to inspect it more carefully or see it, we would arrange to have it brought back into the courtroom and have you brought back into the courtroom to look at it. But just for security purposes, we don't allow Florida. Yes, you can publish it to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. For the record, this is now State's Exhibit 5.
Thank you.
Detective Daney, did you discover anything else in the defendant's truck relating to a firearm while you were searching it?
There was a loaded 9mm magazine separate in a black backpack.
When you say separate, can you tell us where you found that?
I believe that was in the back area, so not in the front two seats, in a backpack.
Did you attempt to collect any additional non-firearm evidence from this truck?
I did. So looking at the truck, it had a series of wires, and I noticed what looked like a camera from the rearview mirror that was pointed out towards the hood. I know that sometimes it's typical of people that are plowing to record, and so I looked and saw that it had a SD card slot, and so that camera system was taken in hopes that there would be some video on there.
Did there ultimately end up being any video that was retrievable?
No, after a search warrant was granted, the extraction showed there was nothing, no recordings of anything. So, just
Did
wasn't.
you collect any other recordings from the defendant's property?
I did, not from the truck.
Not from the truck. Can you tell us where you did collect it from?
Yep. So Detective Garson also said that Mr. Levesque had granted permission to obtain I think it was a Night Owl DVR system, which was the surveillance cameras for 41 Summer Street. We were told that there was a system inside the house at 41 as well as the garage. Myself and Detective Livingstone were able to retrieve the DVR system from the garage because the door was unlocked, but we were unable to, at the time on scene, grab the DVR system from the house because it was locked and no one was answering.
So that night specifically on April 4th, is that DVR video the last piece of evidence you were able to collect that night?
Myself, yes.
Yourself. Did you conduct any other investigation that night? Did you
Yep.
speak to
So upon bringing evidence back to the station and logging it into our evidence lockers, I found that Mr. Levesque's daughter was in the station lobby with officers and hadn't been formally interviewed.
Without getting into the specifics of that interview, did you ultimately conduct an interview?
An interview was conducted with Detective Livingstone and I and Kira Levesque.
Did that specific interview kind of conclude your investigation for that night specifically?
Yes, it did.
Did that conclude your investigation overall?
No, it did not.
Can you tell us a little bit about the next investigative steps that you took?
The next steps, I believe, was Detective Livingstone and I responded to Boston Medical Center upon hearing that the victim, Kyle Violette, had been transported all the way to Boston for his injuries.
And again, without getting into specifics, when you arrived at Boston Medical, were you able to speak with anyone that was there?
Yep, and I was able to speak to Kyle's wife, Angela Recounts, his mother, Cindy Glenn, his daughter, Kendra Violette, and his son, Kyle Violette, was there, but he's a juvenile, and so we didn't speak to him at that time.
Were you able to speak with Kyle when you were there?
I was not.
Why not?
He had a breathing tube down. He was very heavily medicated. He was conscious, per se, that he could moan maybe in pain, but he wasn't able to talk to us at all.
Would it have been functional for you to even attempt to interview him at that point?
No, there would have been no interview.
Is that the only time you went down to Boston Medical?
It is not.
Can you tell us about the next time you went down?
So when I first went down that time, though, I did photograph his injuries, and then we responded back at a later date because Kyle had a bullet that was extracted from his face.
And you mentioned the photographs. I believe it's already been public, admitted as still exhibits. They are 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, and 23.
Counsel. So I only introduced the...
Danny, with Rhea, my previous question. You mentioned you took some photographs. Did you recognize the photos that showed them to you?
I would.
Some of those photos as well. Do you mind just taking a look at this act? Are these photos familiar to you?
They are.
How do you recognize these photos?
These are photos that I took and uploaded to the case from Mr. Violette on the date that we went to Boston Medical Center.
Is this the first time you went to Boston Medical or something?
First time. Yep. First time meeting Kyle himself.
Your Honor, I move that this all be admitted as full exhibits. That is 24, 19, 20, 21, 22.
Back, could you just have a quick inspection.
Yeah. So just to be clear, 19 to 20.
Yes.
So 19 calls.
I think that was the cop one that has been previously used.
These may be admitted without objection.
So no objection. Exhibits 19 through 24 are fully exhibited. Thank you.
Detective Daney, is this the extent of all of the photos you took
No.
that day? If you could estimate how many pictures you took, would you be able to do that?
Say maybe 30 that day.
Did some of those photos include pictures of the victim in this case's genitalia?
Yes.
Good enough, we have not. Did you recognize those photos in the exhibits that I showed you?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I want to clarify. The pictures of the genitalial pictures, were those included in the pictures that I showed you?
No.
Did you want to publish these?
Yes, Your Honor, may I publish to the jury?
Yes, you may.
Would you mind giving me a hand?
Detective Daney, we discussed this very briefly.
My preference is if you're going to be showing the exhibits, you don't ask questions why, unless they're about you.
Understood, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to multitask.
And again, these will be visible back in your deliberation room once that begins. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Detective Daney, can you tell us about your second trip down to Boston Medical?
We had been notified, I believe, by either a family member or even the medical staff that there was a bullet that had been extracted from what was believed to be Kyle's face. And so we went down to retrieve that piece of evidence.
Did you ultimately collect that bullet?
We did.
Detective Daney, I'm going to hand you a pair of gloves.
Thank you.
Detective, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 15 for identification. Having gone through your process of tracking and labeling evidence a few times at this point, can you tell us, based on the label on the outside of this box, what is within?
Yep, this is Rochester Police Department property label. And it says bullet from left side of Kyle Violette's face.
Is that how you would have labeled?
That's what I labeled it.
Would you mind opening that box? I'm going to pause you right there, Your Honor. I do move that this yet be struck in an incident as a full exhibit. This is State's 15.
That's without objection.
No objection. That's a full exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you. Detective Daney, can you tell us about what you're looking at right now?
Yeah, this it's a biohazard bag, and then it is a clear container with what looks like fragmented bullet. And the label says Kyle Violette, 4/5/2024. Gives some of his information as well as the doctor.
Is this the condition in which you received or obtained the bullet?
This is how we received it, and then we packaged it.
I just want to clarify, when you say this is how you received it, are we including the plastic bag that is?
Yeah, this is how the medical staff handed it over to us.
Thank you. Your Honor, permission to publish the jury. after you, and I apologize, did you go down to Boston Medical yourself the second time?
No, I went with Detective Livingstone as well.
Thank you. So after you and Detective Livingstone returned from Boston Medical the second time, did that conclude your investigation in this case?
It did not.
Can you tell us what the next investigative steps that you took were?
I'd have to look at my report. I believe I got a new copy of a video from Angela LaChance at that point.
Would you like to take a look at your report?
That would be great.
Detective, we discussed reports a little bit earlier, but just kind of to review, did you write this report closer in time to the investigative steps that you took than we are today?
I did.
Would it be an accurate representation of the day you took certain steps and what steps those were?
It would.
And would it help refresh your recollection?
It would.
Thank you.
Nice,
This is, yes, 167 to 169.
thank you.
Thanks. Did you want the previous steps too, or for?
After the hospital.
Okay.
Does that help refresh your recollection?
It does.
All right, can you tell us what those next steps were, what that next piece of your investigation was?
So we had previously applied for, like I said, we had seized the DVR systems from 41 Summer Street. We had to apply for a search warrant to actually review the contents of those. So we did that, that was granted, and on the 16th I began the review of those video systems.
Do you recall how many videos you obtained?
I'd have to look. There's a series of different video angles from the garage, the front, as well as the...
Understood. Would seeing a copy of the report
Sure.
help aid in your recollection? Same pages, counsel.
Sorry about that. So I have it listed as camera 1 pointing from the side of 41 Summer Street, and then camera 2 pointing from the front steps of 41 Summer Street.
Does that refresh your recollection?
It does.
Videos that you retrieved and viewed?
Yep.
So, of the two videos, did you view both of them?
I did.
Would you be able to recognize and identify them for the jury if we played them for you?
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe we will. Pardon me, yes.
May we briefly approach?
Quick break, another just quick stretch our legs break and use of the facilities, and hopefully we'll be back here again in about 5 to 10 minutes. All right, thank you very much.
Please rise. Jury departure.
All right, see you in a few minutes.
You can be seated, folks in the gallery. I would like to see counsel before we start. You can stay at the table, though. No, you can stay at the table. No, thank you. So I just I just want to make my position clear that the media has access to these proceedings and they have the same access that a member of the public would have. And so to the extent that they are able to broadcast what's happening in the courtroom, that is their right. When I expressed earlier my preference that they not broadcast inflammatory or very inflammatory images, I was simply expressing a preference. That's not in any way meant to be an order of this court. I just want to make that clear on the record. It's more of a human preference, but I think it's better that those sorts of violent, graphic images not be broadcast in the world, but this is a public proceeding and the public has a right to access. And so I just want to make that clear.
Understood.
All right?
I apologize. I think I missed your question, but yes, you're ready.
During the assembly act. Please rise. Jury entering. Please be seated.
Counsel, you may continue your examination. Are we at the point of needing to rearrange where we are in the room?
Yes, let's start with that since the TV is already set, Your Honor.
Well, it's not supposed to drag over.
It's Detective, if you'll bear with me for a moment
I think you're going to be happy.
while I attempt to set up. But if yes,
Yes, sir.
the judge is correct. If you wouldn't mind stepping down off the witness stand. So Detective Janey, I just want to clarify. In total, how many videos did you view of this incident? Oh.
There was the original video, Officer Birmingham showed me the recording. There was the 43 surveillance camera that had audio. And there was the DVR systems. I believe there was one on the front porch that faces towards Summer Street, at 41 Summer. There was the side angle of the house, and then there was one on the garage.
Okay.
So there should have been 5 potential camera angles, with 2 of them being Officer Birmingham's recording of the same video.
Thank you for clarifying that, Detective.
You guys hear me?
Detective, I'm pulling up one of the videos, and I will turn on the TV in a moment so that we're all able to view which one we are looking at here. Does this image itself, prior to the video playing, look familiar to you?
Yes, this is like one of the camera angles from 41 Summer Street.
Are you able to identify anything in this still of the video that indicates that to you?
Just having reviewed it and seeing kind of the layout, this looks like a work truck as well.
I just want to be clear for the record, this is State's Exhibit 2.
This is a full exhibit, ladies and gentlemen.
Detective Daney, in your review of the videos that you obtained in this case, did you in any way make notes for your own personal use of what was going on in the videos?
I did.
Can you tell us how you went about making those notes?
It's the way that it was playing was on a DLC player, which allows you to do frame by frame, so I can click it and it'll slowly move. Sometimes I'll click it and you won't even have a second pass where you're seeing the frames move. Just because sometimes in videos we watch something happen very quick and I want to break it down as to what actually happened. So from there, I would take the date, the time of the recording, and you'll see that up in the top there's also that goes into the seconds as well. And so from there, I would do the date, the times down to the second, and then narrate what I saw in this case. That's how I documented the video camera angles.
I know the rest of us have been through this before. You have not. As we go through this, I'm going to pause occasionally and we're going to discuss a little bit about what you're looking at both now and when you viewed the videos initially. Are you able to tell us, we've seen quite a few videos and angles of driveways in this particular case. Whose driveway are we looking at right now?
This is 41 Summer Street.
Is that...
This is Levesque.
Okay.
This driveway is where, when I arrived on scene initially for the crime scene, the truck was parked facing in.
And when you say the truck, is that the plow truck that we're looking at
The plow
right
truck,
here?
correct,
Okay.
yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what you see?
So at this point, I see the driver's door open, and I see the driver exiting the vehicle and actually walking past the driver's door.
Is this consistent with the way you viewed this video during the course of your investigation?
It is.
What are you able to tell us about what we're looking at now?
This should be Mr. Kyle Violette approaching Mr. Jason Beck.
At that point, can you tell which direction Mr. Violette is walking?
At that point, paused, it appeared he's walking back towards his residence and turns to face Mr. Beck.
Can you tell us again?
I made the same observation, he's walking back towards 43 Summer Street, but facing Mr. Beck.
I just want to clarify, you arrived at the scene the night that this happened, correct?
I did.
Are you able to tell what is being pointed to based on your knowledge of both the scene and in having reviewed all the videos in this case?
What Kyle Violette's pointing to? He's pointing towards his driveway area where snow was plowed.
Can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at and what we just saw?
I saw Mr. Violette pointing back and forth towards the fully completed snow pile and then walking out of frame. And then I see Mr. Levesque grab and start to point towards the direction of where Mr. Violette was and start to take a step towards his direction.
When you say grab and point, are you able to tell if you believe he's pointing at Mr. Violette?
Based on just the video alone, no. Based on interviews and the other information, as well as the other video and the audio, a firearm.
And I just want to clarify, are you able to tell what direction Mr. Violette was walking just prior to the defendant pulling the firearm?
Back towards his direction.
And I do just want to clarify, was there audio on this video when you viewed it?
There was no audio on the DVR systems obtained. The only audio was from 43 Summer Street video surveillance.
Thank you for clarifying. Are you able to tell in this video which direction Mr. Levesque just stepped?
I'd have to watch that one obviously again. And this is why I went frame by frame with my notes, because I didn't want to miss any sort of steps there. So it appears to me that Mr. Violette walks forward and then starts to go backwards before what looks like a shot is fired.
Okay, and I just want to clarify by backwards, is that in the direction of his own home?
Yep, so forwards towards Mr. Levesque, backwards after towards his own home, and then the shot is fired.
Okay, so it doesn't appear that he's walking towards Mr. Levesque.
Not at that time.
And that flash that we just saw, are you able to tell us what you believe that was?
I'd say it's consistent with the gunshot.
We just saw the defendant move a little bit in that last frame, and I understand I'm stopping and starting this a lot, so if you need me to go back, please let me know, and I'm happy to replay some of that. Can you tell us, during the review that you did of this video where you went frame by frame, were you able to tell, it sounds like you had better pausing technology than we do, approximately how many steps the defendant took towards Mr. Violette after that first shot, or between that first shot and the remaining shots?
What I have it narrated in my report, I believe it was 5 steps towards the direction of Mr. Violette after the first shot was fired.
Were you able to tell in your frame-by-frame review about how long of a pause there was between that first shot and the next shots?
If you looked at my report with the time frame, you'd be able to read that. Yes.
So it sounds like, and I don't want to try and put words in your mouth, but would taking a look at your report
Yes,
help
I'd be able to
calculate
look at the
that?
time frame of showing the first shot versus the time I narrate looking at the next shot.
Thank you. This is just.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to have one second.
Detective Daney, I'm showing you one of the pages of the report that we just made. Please look at that.
Is there something you wanted me to read or just answer the question?
Just to answer the question.
How long?
Approximately how long?
So for this, I would just need to look at the second camera as well. Is that something that's okay? Because he steps out of frame, I don't see the next shots going. I can tell you when he walks towards and steps out of frame and then walks back, just on this camera angle alone. But the second camera picked up him walking forward more, and then what I deem as shots.
We'll go back to that with the next
Okay,
camera then.
so, a matter of 6 seconds between walking forward and then being seen back on camera.
Thank you for that one moment. Looks like we timed out Just a moment, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you. So you mentioned a couple of the other videos. Does one of the other videos you obtained from the Levesque house kind of give an angle of what's happening out of frame in this particular video?
It does. It gives more of a context of what Kyle is doing and what happened when Mr. Levesque steps out of the camera angle facing towards Kyle. I'll tell you that having both angles was huge because we can see what happened by the car, and then we can see what also happened past the hedges and in the front of the house.
So actually-
Both are able to tell the story.
So we're going to go to that next camera angle in a moment. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, that it seems very fast watching the video just as a video itself. Going frame by frame, did that allow you to get a better sense of what was happening and how long it took?
Yes, because I quite literally did bullet points of any time someone's body type of turned. So an example would be Kyle takes steps towards Mr. Levesque. Mr. Levesque is looking at him. Kyle turns around this way. So each camera angle had several different bullet points in a matter of a second, a couple seconds. And this would be that same camera angle we just showed.
Yes.
Okay.
Having both been at the scene and having reviewed all of the videos in this case, are you able to estimate approximately how far Mr. Violette was from Mr. Levesque?
From the point where he gets face to face with him to the point where the shot was fired, I'd say that's maybe about 10 to 15 feet. That's just looking at the distance and looking at how much the truck takes up in the video and knowing the size of an average truck.
Detective Lee, we're going to take a look at that next video you had mentioned. Detective, I'm going to play this video through, and we're going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about what we just saw.
Okay.
But to clarify,
That's the thing.
yes, it'll.
Very good.
What is the angle of this camera?
This is the front steps of 41 Summer Street. And it's faced in an angle that would be pointing towards the driveway direction, and 43 Summer Street, Mr. Kyle Violette's residence is behind us. This one.
So just to clarify, this is recording essentially the street and sidewalk in front of him to the angle of the Levesque porch. In that direction, is that Kyle? You just
That's
saw?
Kyle, he's coming from the direction of his residence.
So I'm going to pause that and go back to a couple of points. I'm going to try and skip to where. So I believe you mentioned this earlier. Is that Mr. Violette?
It is.
And are you able to kind of geographically orient us with where that big tree was that we saw in the last video, just in relation to this porch?
It would be, you were to first.
Please.
So if the porch continued a little bit, there'd be a window and there'd be hedges in the driveway right around here.
Thank you for clarifying that. Detective Danny, based on A, your prior review of this, B, kind of the positioning of some of these shadows over here, are you able to determine at what point Mr. Violette begins walking back to his house, viewing this video in conjunction with the other videos?
Between looking at both and going frame by frame, you can see and start to come into the frame.
So is this, at this point it looks like Mr. Violette has walked farther away from the defendant than we had maybe seen on the first video?
Yes,
See.
just because he's out of frame in the first video. It looks like he was walking away and has turned around at this point and is facing Mr. Levette's direction.
I understand it's a little bit in the top of the video. Can you tell us what we just witnessed kind of up that top corner based on your investigation and your viewing of these videos?
Looking at the video alone, it's Kyle Violette falling to the ground. Based on the other videos, the audio of the gun going off, this was the first shot.
So just to clarify, the defendant would have been out of frame, but he's visible on the other video.
Yes. And visible in the 40% Summer Street.
Does Mr. Violette get up at any point?
No,
And by get up, I just want to clarify, does he stand up?
he does not stand up.
Does he appear to go towards the defendant?
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening now as we're viewing?
Yeah, so when I go frame by frame, I'm saying Kyle Violette falls to the ground this time. This time it looks like he turned around on all fours. I don't see anything in his hands. At this time he is crawling. This time I see a gust of smoke or what looks like smoke that wasn't there before. And based on looking at the other videos, it was, I determined that to be the next initial shot.
Okay, so that would be the next shots after the defendant has stepped forward.
Yes.
based on your knowledge of this case, your scene investigation, is this approximately where Mr. Violette was found by officers in EMT shortly thereafter?
It was. And the photos that were originally taken of the pathway of blood and the concentration of blood there was quite literally just flipped around going this way. If that makes sense.
So, we're going to view one more video. And I just want to clarify, I believe you mentioned, can you tell us about the video you collected the night of the actual shooting?
So the night of the actual shooting would have been from the garage. DVR system had a separate DVR system on the surveillance of 41 such.
And you viewed this video as well? Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Is this the way you recall viewing that video at the time?
Yes.
Can you tell us just what we're looking at?
Yep, you're looking at the driveway of 41 Summer Street. If you can see here, this is the hedge that we were talking about before, so there would have been a camera almost right over this way, or it might have even been this way pointing down. And then this is Summer Street. After this house over here is Mr. Violette's house. This is where the truck was parked when I arrived on the scene to process the scene.
And I do just want to clarify, when you say this is where the truck was parked, it's a little bit difficult to tell in this particular angle, but I do think it may have been clear in the last one. Is there more driveway in this corner?
Yeah, he was able to pull the truck all the way.
So is this camera angle from all the way into the garage?
It's attached right to the garage.
Detective, I'm going to skip ahead because this is a fairly lengthy video to so we see that big kind of white light in the foreground, the background, I suppose. Are you able to tell us what that is?
I'm assuming that that would be glare from both the snow and the lights from the snowplow, yellow amber.
Detective, I understand it's a little farther away than the other videos, but are you able to tell what's going on at the truck's door at this point?
Other than Mr. Violette approaching Mr. Levesque and those two almost face to face, that's what I'm able to determine.
Is this consistent with the other videos that you viewed?
It is.
Detective, I'm going to back that up a little bit, like I just did for the previous video. We're going to go a little bit more in depth with that. So I just want to clarify at this point, is this still Kyle Violette walking?
It is.
This is that initial,
His initial approach to the confronting.
at that point, are you able to view what direction Mr. Violette is walking?
He's walking back towards the direction of his residence.
Does he still appear to be walking back towards his own residence?
Yeah, it seems to be communicating with Mr. Levesque, pointing, but also walking back.
It was very brief. You're able to tell us what you just witnessed between the defendant and Mr. Violette.
Yeah, it looks like Mr. Violette's walking back towards Mr. Levesque. Mr. Levesque raises his hands and points out. Mr. Violette turns around at that point.
At that point, is that another angle, I suppose? Are you able to tell what the defendant's doing from that angle?
It looks like he, after the initial shot, drops his hands and then comes back out, extends, goes to one hand, and approaches the area, and then you look at the other camera angle, he's approaching Kyle Violette.
At any point in any of these videos, do you see the defendant try and help Mr. Violette?
I do not.
Do you see him try and stop the bleeding?
No,
Do you see him try and provide first aid?
I do not.
Detective Daney, I believe we are done with the videos for this portion of your testimony. I do have a couple of additional questions for
Okay.
you.
That's the end of the video.
This is no doubt my fault. You told me to do nothing.
It's durable. Detective Daney, I apologize for a little bit of the inconsistency or out of order questions I'm going to ask you, though, but I do want to go back very briefly to what we were talking about earlier and the scene photos that you took regarding the shell casings and their locations with the placards.
Yep.
Would you recall those pictures if I
would.
showed them to you today?
I don't have any problem with that.
It's, they have not been marked for identification yet, that was. Thank you. Yes, they do.
They all want to do it, they won't.
They can be one exhibit or multiple exhibits for the reference. There are 3 pictures, but they're all there. Yes, sir. Detective Daney, there are 3 photos attached. You wouldn't mind reviewing them and letting me know if you recognize those.
Yep. I recognize these. These are photos I took on scene of the initial crime scene.
Can you tell us what we're looking at in those photos?
This is what I was. You're going to show. Right? This is the overview initial photographs after placards have been placed, so that you can actually see. Oh, this is the location of those placards, and then we would follow up by close-ups of, hey, this is placard 6. What is placard 6 that we're looking at? And so these are placards that are located in the roadway of Summer Street around the area of where that shooting that we just saw occurred. And these placards are the locations of all evidence located, mainly the 6 shell casings.
Your Honor, I asked if you had this minute to see if there's a full exhibit at 625.
Without objection.
Without objection, there are full exhibits, thank you.
videos, reflection of the various scene evidence, your drives down to Boston Memorial, were there any other investigative steps that you took for this particular case?
Detective Livingstone and I had interviewed, I think it's Haley Freeman, who was reported to be inside. That was Kira's friend from UNH. I attended the forensic interview of Kyle Violette for his statement. I examined later the actual shell casings and photographed them with a close-up lens to show that the primer had been struck. So, once again, not a firearms expert, but on the shell casings, we're looking for the firing pin imprint on the back of that shell casing, which would indicate that the firing pin hit and struck the primer, causing that explosion, which would cause the projectile to leave and the shell casing to be extracted. So I was looking for those and photographed those as well.
Do you recall if that was present in the shell casings?
It was,
In all of them?
all 6.
Thank you. One moment, Your Honor. Detective, I have no further questions for you at this point. I imagine Mr. Patrice is due.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a good point prior to